What really happens when your heart stops and everything goes black? Have you ever wondered if the light people talk about after death is really a doorway to peace, or something far more terrifying? I didn't expect to die. No one does. But when I did, it wasn't the end. It was a beginning I wasn't prepared for. A journey into something I never believed in. Something darker than any nightmare I've ever had. People love to talk about near-death experiences. The peaceful ones. The ones with angels.
And music and warmth. But no one talks about what happens when the light you're chasing turns cold. When that peaceful glow pulls you into something twisted. A place where regret breathes. And your soul stands exposed under a judgment you can't escape. I remember the moment my body gave out. The silence, the floating, the stillness. And then, light. So bright, so calm. It felt like safety. I let go. I trusted it. But that was my first mistake. Because the light didn't embrace me. It examined me. Every thought, every lie, every action I buried deep inside me. And as I stood in that glowing space, something shifted. The warmth faded. The silence changed. And the light showed me something I wish I could forget. My near-death experience wasn't filled with peace. It was filled with exposure, with truth, with something that felt like hell, but colder. It wasn't fire that burned. It was the weight of my own soul being judged by a force that didn't speak, but knew everything. Every second I stood there, I felt less like a person, and more like a reflection of my worst moments. Time didn't move, and yet it crushed me. Why do we assume that death brings clarity, that it brings comfort? What if what waits for us on the other side is not heaven, not even fire, but ourselves, our rawest truths, with nowhere to hide? I saw something in that light I can't unsee, and I'm not here to tell you a story to entertain you. I'm here because someone needs to hear this. Maybe you. There's something about being pulled from your body, seeing your life from above, hearing doctors yell and alarms blare, but knowing you're not coming back. Not yet, because someone is showing you who you really are, not who the world sees, not who your friends believe in, but who you've become deep down, when no one's looking. I don't know if I was dead for minutes or hours, but I know what I saw, I know what I felt, and I know now, we don't just die and disappear. We face what we've become. And sometimes that is far worse than anything we imagined hell to be. Before I take you deeper into what that light revealed, before I show you the moment everything broke, I want you to think about this. If you were to die right now, right this second, what would the light show you? Leave your answer in the comments. Have you ever felt like there was something watching you, judging you, even when no one else was around? And if this already hits something inside you, if you've ever questioned what comes after death, make sure to subscribe right now. Turn on notifications, because what I'm about to share with you could change the way you see everything, forever. I wasn't always someone who thought about the afterlife, heaven, hell, near-death experiences. Those things were just stories to me. Words people used to cope with pain, myths told in churches to keep people in line. I didn't hate the idea of God. I just didn't think he cared. If he did, why was the world the way it was? Why? Were people like me left empty, searching for something real and always coming up short? I lived most of my life in a fog, walking through days that all felt the same, disconnected from purpose, numb to anything that used to make me feel alive. Faith wasn't just something I ignored, it was something I rejected, because believing in something greater meant admitting I might not be in control, and that was something I couldn't accept. Not then. I wasn't evil. I didn't hurt people for fun, but I wasn't good either. I was careless, emotionally absent. I burned bridges and called it survival. I told myself that regret was for the weak, that as long as I kept moving forward, it didn't matter what I left behind. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Every night before I fell asleep, I felt it. The silence, the weight, the voice I tried to shut out. It never yelled, it never accused. It just existed, reminding me that something was wrong, that I was drifting further and further from something I couldn't name, something sacred. I had this one regret, buried deep inside, something I never talked about, something no one knew, not my friends, not my family. It was mine alone. and I kept it locked away in a place so hidden, I thought even God couldn't reach it. But that's the thing about dying. When your body gives out and your soul slips into the unknown, nothing stays hidden. Every secret, every lie, every moment you hoped would disappear, it all rises like smoke in the dark. I see that now, but back then, I told myself it didn't matter, that it was in the past, that people move on, that pain fades, that forgiveness was optional. The truth is, I didn't believe in forgiveness. Not really. I thought it was a nice idea for people who lived cleaner lives, people who went to church, who prayed, who had something I didn't. I used to laugh at religious people, the ones who talked about heaven like it was a destination you could earn, the ones who warned about hell like they'd been there and back. I thought they were weak. I thought they were afraid of death. I wasn't. I wasn't afraid of anything, or so I told myself. But it's easy to be fearless when you've never seen what waits on the other side. Easy to pretend nothing matters when you think this life is all there is. And then there was the anger. Not loud, screaming rage. Quiet, slow burning anger. At the world. At people who left. At myself. I blamed others for the way my life turned out. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had choices. I had moments where I could have turned around, apologized, tried again. But I didn't. I shut down. I numbed out. I chose silence. I chose pride. I chose the easy way out, again and again, until I didn't recognize myself anymore. I wasn't living. I was surviving. Just enough to keep up appearances. Just enough to function. Just enough to avoid facing the thing I feared most, myself. There were nights I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was being watched. Not by a person, not by anything I could see, but something deeper. Like the air itself was aware of me, aware of the things I'd done, the things I'd ignored, the people I'd hurt without even realizing it. I pushed that feeling down. I distracted myself. Music, work, noise, anything to fill the space where truth tried to speak. Because facing it meant changing, and changing meant letting go of the walls I'd built to protect myself. I didn't know how to love. Not really. I said the words when I needed to. I acted like I cared when it was convenient. But real love, the kind that sacrifices, the kind that forgives, the kind that stays, I didn't have that in me. Or maybe I did once, and I lost it along the way. Somewhere between heartbreak and disappointment, I stopped trying. I told myself people always leave, that nothing lasts, that pain is just part of life. But the truth is, I was afraid to be seen, afraid someone would see who I really was and walk away. So I kept them at arm's length, always. And faith? That was for other people. I didn't pray. I didn't read anything spiritual. I didn't seek meaning. I sought distraction. I filled my time with anything but reflection. Because the one time I did try to connect with something higher, I felt nothing. No warmth, no light, just silence. And in that silence, I decided it wasn't real. That maybe people made it up to feel better about dying. So I shut the door, locked it, swallowed the key. But something strange happened before everything changed. I started having dreams, not vivid ones, just shadows, darkness, whispers I couldn't understand, and always the same feeling when I woke up, like something was missing, like I was supposed to remember something important but couldn't. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, sweating, heart racing, and tell myself it was just stress, just exhaustion. But a small voice inside started to ask questions. What if this isn't just stress? What if this is something else? Still, I ignored it. I had a life to live, responsibilities, bills, noise, so much noise, the kind that keeps your soul from speaking. And so I kept running, from the voice, from myself, from God, if he was even out there. Looking back now, I realize how far I had drifted, not just from faith, but from everything real. I couldn't remember the last time I cried, really cried. I couldn't remember the last time I told someone the truth. I wore a mask so well, even I believed it sometimes. But masks don't fool death, and they don't fool the light. In those final days, something inside me started to break. Quietly, not dramatically, just a slow collapse. I started avoiding mirrors. I didn't like what I saw, not physically, spiritually. I felt hollow, like something important had been drained out of me, and I didn't even notice when it happened. I thought it was depression, I thought maybe I just needed sleep or a vacation. But the truth was, my soul was warning me, whispering to me, trying, one last time, to wake me up. But I didn't listen. And when my heart finally stopped, I wasn't afraid. Not at first. It was peaceful, strangely peaceful, like falling asleep. But when I opened my eyes on the other side, everything changed. The light that greeted me wasn't soft. It wasn't warm. It was sharp. It saw me, all of me. And it began to peel back the layers I'd spent a lifetime building. It started with the smallest memory, one I hadn't thought of in years, and then another, and another, until the regret I thought I buried was standing in front of me, alive, breathing, accusing, not with words, just presence. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. I was there, alone, naked, exposed, and the light wasn't letting me escape, because this was the price of numbness. This was the truth beyond denial. This was the place where every choice echoed into eternity, and I still didn't know then. This was only the beginning. Under the blinding white lights of the emergency room, everything felt distant, almost as if I were watching someone else's body give up. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the air. The coldness of the table pressed against my back. Monitors beeped in rapid, frantic rhythms, until one by one they began to slow. Nurses called out numbers. A doctor barked orders, but their voices became muffled, like I was slipping underwater, and nothing they said could reach me anymore. My chest tightened once, twice, and then everything stopped. The final beep stretched into a flat line. The room was chaos around me, but inside I felt something else. Stillness, a strange quiet, and then the warmth of my body began to vanish. I didn't scream. I didn't struggle. There was no pain, just the awareness that my body was no longer mine. I felt the cold start in my fingertips, creeping like a fog through my arms and legs. My heartbeat was gone. My breath was gone. But I was still there, watching, existing, conscious. My vision blurred, then focused again, not on the ceiling above me, but on something else, something beyond. For a moment, I floated above the room. I saw myself lying there, lifeless, pale. I saw the rush of nurses, the defibrillator pads being placed on my chest, the desperation in the doctor's face. But none of it felt urgent to me. I wasn't afraid, not yet. I was just watching, floating, as if my soul had slipped loose and was now hovering between two dimensions, no longer bound by flesh or weight. I didn't question it. There wasn't time, because something was calling me. Out of the edge of that suspended silence came a glow, not a spotlight, not fire. It was a tunnel, no, a corridor of light, wide and endless. Soft at first, but too white to be peaceful. I felt it pull at me, not like gravity, more like magnetism. My body stayed behind, but I was moving forward, slowly, drawn by something I didn't understand. It wasn't warm, it wasn't cold, it just was. Pure existence. The very fabric of being was unfolding in front of me, opening a door that couldn't be closed. As I moved through that tunnel, I noticed there were no sounds, no voices, no whispers, no music. The silence was absolute, and in that silence I felt exposed. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. It was like something on the other side of that light could see through me, through everything I had been, every word I'd spoken, every secret I thought was mine alone. The closer I got, the heavier I felt, not on my body, but on my soul. This was the moment I thought people meant when they said they saw heaven, the light, the peace. But it wasn't peace, it wasn't joy, it was observation. I was being watched, studied, not by eyes, but by presence. A presence that didn't speak, but understood everything. It didn't accuse, it didn't comfort, it simply knew. And the more it knew, the more I felt the weight of who I truly was. Then I stopped floating. In an instant, the sensation shifted. No more lightness, no more detachment. I was falling, not physically, spiritually, as if the center of my being had been gripped and was being dragged downward, not against my will, but as if I had no choice. Not falling through air, but through a dense, invisible force that pressed in from all sides. I couldn't breathe, not because I needed air, but because the fall took something deeper from me. It took the illusion of control. I reached for something, anything, but there was nothing to hold on to. No hands to grasp, no ledge to catch, no light to guide me. Only the sense that I was being pulled further away from the world I knew, further from life, further from forgiveness. I don't know how long I fell. There was no time where I was, only descent, endless descent into something I didn't yet understand but already feared. And then I stopped. No crash, no impact, just stillness again. But this time it was different. The air, or whatever existed in that space, was thick, heavy. It pressed against me, around me, inside me. I opened my eyes, and the light was still there, but it wasn't gentle anymore. It was harsh, sterile, unfeeling, like a spotlight in an interrogation room. And I was the only one under it. I wasn't standing. I wasn't lying down. I was just there, suspended in that brightness, and yet completely alone. I looked around, but there was no one. No angels, no voices, no gates. Just the white, endless glow that now felt less like an invitation and more like exposure. And then I felt it, that presence again, the same one that had pulled me forward. It wasn't speaking, but it was communicating, not with words, but with awareness. I felt known, fully, completely. There were no walls left, no masks, no pretending, just truth, my truth. The light became sharper, slicing through every memory, every decision, every regret. I didn't hear accusations, I didn't see flames, but I felt judgment. I felt it like a weight pressing into my soul. I remembered things I hadn't thought about in decades, moments I'd buried so deep I believed they were gone. They weren't. They were there, alive, echoing in that space with more clarity than I thought possible. Every time I lied, every time I turned away from someone who needed me, every time I silenced the voice inside that told me to do better. And that secret, the one I thought I buried so deep, it was there too, not just remembered, manifested, as if the memory itself had taken form and now stood in front of me, silent, unforgiving. I wanted to run. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. Not in that place, because there's no escaping what you become when the flesh is stripped away and only the soul remains. I tried to speak, but no sound came. I tried to pray, but the words felt empty. The light didn't respond. It just stayed, waiting, watching. And the longer I stood in it, the more I realized I wasn't just being judged by something divine. I was judging myself, with a clarity I never had in life. I saw the ripples of my actions, the pain I caused, the kindness I withheld, the time I wasted. It all played out, not as a movie, but as emotion, as weight, as undeniable truth. And in that truth I saw myself for what I really was. This wasn't heaven, and it wasn't fire. It was worse. It was knowing that I had the chance to live differently, to choose love over pride, to choose forgiveness over silence, to choose faith over fear. And I didn't, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't care. I didn't believe. I thought death would be the end, a blank page, but it wasn't. It was a mirror, and that mirror didn't lie. I followed the light, but it didn't feel like salvation. It felt like judgment, a silent, all-consuming revelation that I couldn't escape. And in that moment, as the weight of my own soul bore down on me, I understood the truth. I wasn't where I thought I'd be. I wasn't being welcomed. I was being shown what comes when you live a life without light, when you spend your years running from truth. And the worst part was, I wasn't done falling. Not yet. Before you continue with this content that shows you what it's like to stand face to face with eternal judgment, you need to check out the ebook, Secrets of Life. This book reveals deep teachings from the scriptures, truths long forgotten by many, lessons that will strengthen your faith, restore your spirit, and help you understand God's path even in your darkest moments. It's not just another book. It's a warning, a spiritual map for those who feel on the edge, between faith and emptiness, between the calling and the abyss. You don't have to wait for a life-altering wake-up call to open your eyes. After this video, click the link in the description and begin your spiritual turnaround today, because tomorrow might be too late. The light that once surrounded me like a cocoon of silence began to flicker, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. But then the flickering grew more violent, like something was trying to tear its way through the illusion. The brightness didn't dim all at once. It cracked, like shattered glass. Every fracture in that holy radiance revealed what lay beneath it. And what lay beneath was not heaven. It was something else. Something raw, something ancient, something waiting. As the last of the light collapsed into itself, I was left standing in a silence so complete it screamed. The glow faded into a thick, suffocating black. It wasn't just darkness. It was presence. A living, breathing void that wrapped itself around my soul like a second skin. I could no longer see my hands. I could no longer feel my feet. But I knew I was still there, because I could feel the weight of what was coming. It crept in slowly, crawling across my awareness like cold fingers stretching across a mirror. I wasn't alone anymore. The shadows moved first, not walking, not flying, just shifting, like smoke with intent. Their shapes were human and not human. Fragments of forms I couldn't fully comprehend. Their faces were blurred but familiar. Some of them watched me with hollow eyes. Others turned away as if ashamed, but none of them spoke. They didn't need to, because their silence said everything. And then the screams began. At first they sounded far away, distant echoes bouncing off the walls of eternity. But they grew louder, closer, until they weren't just in the air. They were inside me, voices crying out. Some pleading, some cursing, some simply howling, in endless pain. And what struck me most was not the volume, but the familiarity. I knew these screams, not personally, but spiritually. I recognized the tone, the desperation, the terror. It was the sound of souls who had seen the truth too late. And then I saw the first face. It hovered in the dark like a reflection on water. A woman, crying, her hands covered in something dark. Her mouth open but voiceless. She didn't look at me. She looked through me, as if I were a window to her past. Behind her came another face, a man, young, eyes hollow, skin cracked like clay. His jaw moved as if trying to form words, but no sound emerged. And then another, and another, a parade of the forgotten, the condemned, the shattered, all drifting through the dark like pieces of a nightmare too broken to wake from. I tried to turn away, but there was no direction. The darkness had no walls, no floor, no sky, only depth, infinite depth. I wasn't standing, I wasn't floating. I was suspended in judgment. And then, in the middle of it all, I saw something worse than the faces. I saw myself, not the self others knew, not the self I showed the world, but the self I hid, the real me, the one I buried beneath years of denial, pride, and silence. He stood across from me, eyes vacant, posture heavy with shame. I recognized the slouch of his shoulders, the lines around his eyes, the twitch in his jaw when he was trying not to cry. It was me, but broken, hollow, exposed. He didn't speak, didn't need to, because everything he wanted to say, I already knew. Every memory, every lie, every betrayal played across his face like film on a loop. I saw myself turning away from people who needed help. I saw myself lying to protect my ego. I saw myself letting silence take the place of truth, again and again, because it was easier, because I was a coward, and the shadows around me responded. They didn't attack, they didn't accuse, they revealed. One by one, they became scenes, not dreams, not metaphors, memories, real moments I had long since buried. The time I ignored a friend's cry for help, the time I spoke words I couldn't take back, the time I chose anger over compassion, the time I watched someone break and walked away. Each regret took form, became visible, tangible, like sculptures carved from guilt, and every one of them looked at me, not with hatred, but with disappointment. I wasn't being tortured, I was being shown everything I had chosen not to see, everything I had refused to feel. This wasn't punishment from something outside me. This was the judgment I had built with my own hands. And as the darkness grew thicker, the air began to shift, heavy, pressed, like gravity in reverse. Instead of pulling me down, it pushed against me from all sides, forcing me to feel every choice I ever made, every second I wasted, every opportunity I ignored. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating, a silence that screamed my name without sound. Then came The worst part, I saw the moment that defined everything. A single memory, one that I had spent years trying to forget. It came back in perfect detail. The room, the smell, the words I didn't say, the person I didn't forgive, the phone call I never returned, the apology I never made. It sat in the darkness like a wound that never healed, pulsing with the heartbeat of the past. And I realized this was the regret that chained me here. I tried to speak, tried to scream, but the words caught in my throat like ash. My voice was gone. Or maybe it was never real to begin with. Maybe I had spent so long silencing it in life that it no longer existed in death. I reached out toward that memory, as if I could rewrite it, but my hand passed through it like smoke, and the regret smiled, not cruelly, but knowingly. It knew I had waited too long, and now all I could do was remember. I saw others too, faces from my past, people I'd hurt without meaning to, people I'd ignored when they were drowning, people who believed in me once. Their faces flickered in and out of the dark like broken film. None of them spoke, but I felt their pain, not through words, through weight, through emotion, through something deeper than understanding. I felt it in my soul, like fire without flame, and in that fire, I saw truth. Hell is not a place of flames and demons with pitchforks. Hell is the absence of light after you've tasted it. Hell is seeing everything you could have been and knowing you turned away. Hell is the echo of your own voice when it's too late to speak. Hell is you, raw, unforgiven, exposed. I saw myself in that place. Not once, not twice, but over and over. 1,000 versions of me, each one tied to a moment of failure, a choice not made, a kindness withheld, a truth ignored. And I couldn't run, because there was nowhere to run. There was only here, only now, only this endless reflection of everything I tried to pretend wasn't real. The shadows closed in, not to harm me, but to, surround me. They whispered without sound. They judged without words. They reminded me that nothing is ever forgotten, that the soul keeps score, and the light, once so promising, had become a mirror, a cruel, beautiful mirror that showed me not just who I had been, but who I could have been. And the most terrifying part of all was realizing this wasn't some cosmic mistake. I was not dragged here by force. I followed the light, willingly, trusting it, believing it would save me. But the light had a different purpose. It came not to deliver me, but to reveal me. And what it revealed was the one thing I had feared most: myself, alive, feeding on every ounce of emotion I tried to suppress. The shadows had taken form, but now the space between them moved too. The silence shifted into something deeper, something aware. I couldn't see anything new, but I knew something was there, watching me, not judging with wrath, but waiting with purpose. The air grew thicker, like every breath I tried to take was made of smoke. My mind echoed with the memories I thought were behind me, but the echo wasn't just memory anymore. It was presence. And then, without warning, I heard it. It didn't come from above. It didn't surround me like the voice of some great being. It came through me, from within and without, vibrating in the deepest core of my soul like it had always been there, but I had refused to listen. It didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It spoke like thunder hidden inside stillness. The voice didn't sound like a man. It didn't sound like a woman. It wasn't a voice like anything I had ever heard, but I understood every word as if they were carved into the very bones of my existence. You must see what you've become before I show you what you could be. My heart, or whatever replaced it in that realm, felt like it would burst. I tried to ask who was speaking. My mouth moved, but my voice was still gone. There was no response, but there was no need for one. The truth didn't require an introduction. In that moment, I understood that whatever this presence was, it knew me more intimately than I had ever known myself. It wasn't angry, it wasn't disappointed, but it was immovable, absolute. I wasn't being invited into comfort. I was being invited into reckoning. The voice vanished, but its words echoed in everything around me. And then the air cracked again, like the atmosphere itself was being torn open. The regrets returned, but this time, they weren't just images or emotions. They were alive, moving, breathing, staring. The deepest one, the one I feared most, stepped out of the dark like a ghost, rising from the ashes. I had seen it before, but this time it wasn't quiet. This time, it reached for me. Its hand was my hand. Its face was my face, but older, more broken, etched with pain I never let myself feel. Its eyes burned with something I recognized instantly: shame. Not the kind that fades, but the kind that anchors, the kind that grows in silence and chokes out the soul. It didn't speak with a mouth. It didn't need to. It pressed itself into me without touch, flooding my senses with everything I had spent years avoiding. The words I didn't say, the forgiveness I never offered, the prayers I never whispered. And I realized it wasn't showing me what I'd done. It was pulling me into what I had become, that regret. It wasn't just a memory. It was alive, and it wanted to drag me down. The darkness beneath my feet, if I even had feet, began to shift. It rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. But this was no water. It was thicker, blacker, as if the foundation of that realm was made from the condensed sorrow of every lost soul. I felt it open beneath me, not a hole, but a descent. It didn't fall away suddenly. It invited, lured, whispered with the seduction of self-pity. Come, sink, belong. It wasn't hell in fire. It was hell in feeling, in truth, in being forced to live the things you thought were dead. I wanted to fight it, but I couldn't, because a part of me still believed I deserved it. A part of me had carried guilt for so long it had become familiar, comfortable, like a second skin I never bothered to remove. I was drowning, not in water, not in flames, but in everything I never healed. The shadows didn't touch me. They didn't need to. I was already doing the work for them. I had brought the chains. They just held the key. And then, for a moment that split eternity, I remembered something. Not a moment of pain, a moment of light. Memory from long ago, almost too faint to recognize. I was a child, alone in my room, crying for a reason I no longer remember. And I whispered into nothing, a tiny, fragile prayer. Just one sentence. Please don't leave me alone. I hadn't thought of that moment in decades. It was buried under years of disbelief. But it came back now with a force that cut through the dark like a blade of glass. The regret that had wrapped itself around me paused. It didn't retreat, but it froze, like it recognized something I had forgotten. The atmosphere didn't change. The weight didn't lift. But something was different. That voice returned. Do you remember? I tried to respond, but again, no sound, only feeling. I did remember. That small prayer, that childlike faith, the innocence that existed before I learned to doubt, before I learned to hate, before I learned to lie. It wasn't power. It wasn't theology. It was pure, real, undeniable. And that memory burned hotter than any guilt. Forgiveness it wasn't yet, but it was awareness. A tiny ember in the frozen wasteland of my spirit. The regret responded violently. It lashed back. It screamed in silence. Not in fear, but in protest. It didn't want to let go. It had fed on me for too long. It had become me. But now it was being challenged. Not by light, not by fire, but by truth. The kind of truth that exists before you learn how to build walls. The kind of truth that still remembers what it means to hope. And then the ground broke. Again. This time wider, deeper. The descent beneath me called out with voices I could almost understand. Pleas, curses, laughter twisted into agony. It was a pull I couldn't resist. I was sinking. The regret held fast. And the voice returned one more time. You must choose. Not with words, not with actions, with intention, with surrender. The regret pressed closer. The dark pressed tighter. And something in me began to rise. Not pride, not fear, but a question. A silent, trembling question that asked if there was still time. The regret laughed, if it could be called laughter. It mocked the memory. It mocked the voice. It mocked the idea that anything I did now mattered. But I looked into its face, and for the first time, I didn't see a demon. I didn't see evil. I saw myself, broken, twisted, lost. And somewhere in that brokenness, I saw the smallest fragment of longing. Like even it wanted to let go, but didn't know how. The voice said nothing more. It didn't need to. Everything had been spoken. Every truth exposed. Every mask torn away. I was standing in the raw space between judgment and mercy, and both waited without force. The light had shown me what I had become, but now, in this terrible quiet, I was being asked something greater, to see what I could be. The darkness churned, the regret trembled, and I remained on the edge of a descent I could no longer deny. The choice was mine, but not in the way I thought. This wasn't about religion. This wasn't about punishment. This was about presence, reality, consequence, surrender. And in that moment, time held its breath, because whatever happened next would not be decided by fate. It would be decided by what I truly believed deep within my soul. Not the beliefs I claimed, but the ones I lived. And then, without warning, the shift came. It wasn't light, it wasn't sound. It was force, sudden, unrelenting. Like something ancient had decided my time there was over, and it pulled me with a violence that didn't bruise skin, but shredded every layer of illusion I had left. The darkness didn't let go. It was ripped away, torn from my awareness like it had claws embedded in my soul. And for the first time since dying, I felt motion again, upward, sharp, brutal. Not like floating this time, not peaceful, like being dragged through glass. Every inch upward screamed with the friction of regret being peeled away from what I now understood to be the raw truth of who I was. There was a sound now, low, distant, a pulse, a tremor, then a voice. Not the one I heard in the dark, but this one was human, earthly, a tone I had forgotten, urgent, panicked, shouting. The rhythm of machines returned, not in the spiritual sense, real ones, screaming alarms, shuffling feet, cold air, and the unbearable weight of gravity crashing into me as my body welcomed my soul back like a host it didn't recognize. I gasped. The first breath back was pain, sharp, hollow. My lungs burned like they had been soaked in ice, then fire. I opened my eyes, but the light above was different now. Artificial, hospital bulbs, blinking, clinical. Someone screamed my name, someone cried. Hands touched my face, my chest, my wrist. A voice shouted, "He's back." But I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just stared at the ceiling and remembered where I had been. I was back in my body, but my body no longer felt like mine. It was heavier, not from injury, but from knowing. My skin felt tight, my bones foreign. I blinked, once, twice, and every time I closed my eyes, the darkness behind my eyelids threatened to become that same place. Not because it was pulling me back, but because now I carried part of it with me. Not a curse, a memory, the kind that stains deeper than skin. People leaned over me, doctors, nurses, family, faces blurred by tears and urgency. Someone said I was gone for 4 minutes. Others said longer. I didn't care. Time didn't mean what it used to. Minutes here were not the same as the eternity I felt on the other side. I couldn't hear every word they said, but I could hear their fear, their relief. And under it all, I heard the sound I once ignored, my heartbeat, loud, relentless, and now, a reminder. The world didn't feel real at first. The walls felt too flat, the colors too dull. My body was shaking, not from pain but from truth. I had returned, but something inside me hadn't come back the same. I knew now that life was not just flesh and time. It was spirit. It was weight. It was decision after you. Decisions stacking up like bricks, shaping the structure that would stand long after the body gave out. I wasn't the same. I had seen the truth behind the light, and the truth wasn't peaceful. It wasn't gentle. It was reflection, judgment, not from a God that hated me, not from some angry deity with a list, but from my own soul being laid bare before the reality of consequence. I had seen who I was when everything else was stripped away, not who I pretended to be, not who others believed I was, but who I became in silence, in the dark, in the moments when only I was watching myself. That is what the light showed me. That is what the darkness demanded I face. Lying in that hospital bed, machines keeping rhythm with my breath, I tried to speak. No words came. My throat was raw, like I had screamed for centuries in silence. A nurse leaned down and told me to rest. But how do you rest after walking through your own soul and finding it empty? How do you sleep, knowing you stood one decision away from never waking up again? from falling into that pit of endless reflection with no return. They say trauma changes people, and maybe that's true. But this wasn't trauma. This was revelation. This was spiritual interruption. This was the divine slamming its hand on the table and demanding I pay attention. And now that I was back, I couldn't go back to who I was. I wouldn't even know how. For days I said nothing. I stared at walls. I replayed every second, every image, every face, every echo of that voice. I remembered the regret that reached for me like it owned me. I remembered the voice that gave me one last chance to choose. And I remembered the silence that came after, the one that held its breath while I decided. I didn't return by accident. I know that now. I wasn't dragged back against my will. I was sent back, not as a reward, but as a warning. Hell didn't scare me the most. It was knowing I almost never faced what I needed to, because hell wasn't red, it wasn't fire, it wasn't screams and torment in the way we imagine. It was silence. It was exposure. It was the absence of excuse. It was the truth living in front of me, in a form I couldn't escape. That place didn't punish me. It revealed me, and it let me feel the gravity of everything I never fixed, the people I never forgave, the guilt I never released, the prayers I never whispered. When people visited, I smiled, I nodded, but inside I was rearranging the entire architecture of my existence. I began to see them differently, not as friends or family or strangers, but as souls, as walking eternities carrying wounds just like mine, wounds they might not even know they had. And I wanted to tell them everything, every image, every shadow, every word I heard, but I couldn't, not yet, because they wouldn't hear it unless they were ready. And most people aren't ready. I wanted to scream it from the rooftops, that there is more, that there is weight in every word we say, every action we take, every moment we ignore. But the world doesn't listen to screams. It listens to stories. And this one is still unfolding. Because the truth is, I'm still haunted. Not by demons, not by monsters, but by memory. I close my eyes and I see it all. The dark, the light, the in-between. And every time I do, I'm reminded that I was given something not everyone gets. A second chance. A return ticket from the edge of spiritual collapse. Not so I could forget, but so I could remember. So I could share. So I could speak, even if my voice trembles under the weight of what I saw. If you've come this far, if something in your heart is stirring right now, if some part of you is remembering the weight of silence in your own life, then maybe this isn't just my story. Maybe it's yours too. If this reached you, maybe it's not too late for you either.